Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. For the people who are watching online, this is the Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny meeting, and I'm here with several councillors. So we have Rochelle, Alistair, Michael and Norman, and I'm Andy, as well as Sarah, who's not here as a member of the committee, but is here as the executive member for the Climate Emergency. And we have several officers with us in the room and also online who've very kindly giving up their evenings. And also Councillor Ian Shenton is online as well. Okay, so first of all, do we have any apologies, please, now?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from David Cornish, and Al Neil is here as a substitute.
Fantastic. Okay, good, thank you. And the minutes of the previous meeting, which were circulated, I saw a comment from Al, I think, because Al was a substitute last time and that wasn't reflected in the minutes.
Yeah.
So that can be amended. Are there any other amendments to the minutes from last time? No, so would someone like to propose that we accept the minutes from last time? Okay, so Al, I think, and Michelle proposed and seconded. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? None. Good. Okay. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, I have a declaration of interest. I'm on the project board of the Barkham Solar Farm project, but I don't think it will make a difference to anything we're going to cover in this meeting. Public question time. Are there any questions from the public now?
No public questions and no member questions, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. So we're on item number 16 on the agenda then. And that's the carbon savings from the waste collection proposals. I think this came out of the consideration of the move to alternative weekly collections, and there was a number given in that document that members wanted to look at. So do any officers want to say anything on this first? It's a very short report.
Chair, if you like, I'm happy to give a very brief presentation.
We're just waiting for your volume to be turned up, Richard.
Okay. Hopefully that works. Okay, is that any better?
I've been asked if you could talk more loudly.
Okay.
It's a long distance line, so you have to shout.
It really is. Okay, I'll do my best. How's this? How's this for testing?
Try again, Richard.
Okay. How's this? Any better?
You're very faint. You're very faint. I don't know if you can project. Yeah.
I'll do my best. Can you hear me now?
Just about. We'll have to be very quiet while we're listening to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Let's see how we get on, and we go from there. So thanks for the invite tonight. My name is Richard Bissett. I'm head of public realm for Woking Borough Council. I'm joined tonight by Emma Tilbrook, who's a consultant with Eunomia, and they've been helping us through alternative weekly collections in terms of guidance, methodology, etc., as well as savings on finance and also carbon. You're absolutely correct, Chair. This presentation came out of a motion from the Overview and Scrutiny panel on the 22nd of February, where there was a motion to ask for further information and clarification of carbon savings. So I would just like to go through those with you tonight. So in terms of the calculations of the savings, they were produced through methodology approved by the Waste and Resources Action Programme, WRAP, we commissioned Eunomia to also work with us on the carbon savings, to identify where they could actually be realised from by implementing alternate weekly collections. So the modelling itself looks at the greenhouse gas emissions across both the collection and disposal processes, and it compares the improvement against the baseline service. So, i.e., what are we doing now? The negative values you can see there indicate there is a carbon saving as compared to the baseline, i.e., what we're doing now. And I'll just go through those briefly with you. So the whole principle of alternate week collections is moving residual recyclable waste that's in the residual to dry recycling, and also organic waste or food waste. You can actually see a dramatic shift, especially around the dry recycling is 1,750 tonnes, and the organic recycling, which is the curbside food waste, of 193 tonnes. And that is just because there is less environmental impact by recycling and composting than it would be if you took it to be disposed of through energy from waste or landfill. There's also an element of waste minimisation and waste loss when you go to alternate week collection service, and that's somewhat represented in the residual waste, 888 tonnes of carbon saving per annum. The slight uptick in terms of contamination there, that's 91 tonnes that's been calculated, and that's due to materials going into the green bag as well as the food waste caddy, which shouldn't be in there, but we are going to put in a really good comms campaign and support our residents through any changes and make sure everyone knows what to recycle where. There's also a slight uptick in terms of the transport of 325 tonnes of CO2, and that is due to simply more recycling being generated and therefore more transport going to take the recycling to the end treatment points for it to be recycled or reused. So overall, we're just over 2,400 tonnes of saving projected of carbon dioxide each year, and I'm happy to take any questions, and also say, if it is approved, then we can come back to this forum at a later date and give you an update in terms of our performance.
Thank you very much. So I have got Michael, I've got Norman, I've got Al. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you for that, Richard. Very, very interesting. I mean, the contamination transport ones do stand out, obviously. But I just really wondered on this sort of campaign you're going to do to persuade or try to tell residents into what different receptacles, whatever the rubbish recycling should be put into. I just wondered how you intend to do that. It does look as though what's happened in the past probably hasn't worked.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, so when we're looking into the new world of alternate week collections, there will be a robust comms campaign, and it won't be just one item. It will be a multitude of items on a drip feed basis, which will start before the bins are rolled out as well. I think the communications and the most effective way of doing that is to make it as clear as possible, concise as possible, and easy as possible for residents to understand what to put where. And we've already got some really good ideas as to graphics and also videos and pictures on the website, just to explain what materials should go where, and just highlight those kind of difficult to recycle materials which can be taken to other places such as supermarkets, which we can't take at the moment. So we've got a robust campaign in plan, It will be a drip feed approach, and it will be a simple, clear approach.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we do appreciate it. Yeah, sort of supermarkets do take up like batteries and that sort of thing. But if you could bring it back to the next meeting, that would be interesting to see the progress that you've made.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, Richard, Norman. The 2,415 tonnes savings, how does that compare with the current baseline position? What sort of percentage saving is that?
Okay, thanks, Norman. I will hand over to Emma, who might be able to give you that information. If not, we'll get back to you on it.
Yeah, thanks, Norman. Emma here from Eunomia. Yeah, we'd have to get back to you on the percentage saving, because off the top of my head, I don't have that. And I wouldn't want to give you an accurate figure, so if it's okay, we'll follow up with that, because the calculation is effectively different from the baseline position. We don't tend to calculate as percentage as a rule, but we can come back to you on that, because it will be different for different materials. So it's important that we get that per material stream correct for you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I suppose that moves on to my next question, which is what the calculations are for each waste stream. I mean, you've just said it's different for each waste stream, so there must be an assumption about tons of waste and tons of carbon dioxide. So it'd just be interesting to know that, so that we can follow this more clearly. I mean, for example, you've said if the one on residual waste is, you've got 888 tonnes of CO2. At the Scrutiny management meeting on 22nd February, you told us that there was about 774 tonnes difference. So it'd just be interesting to see if, how these equate. Are these based, I suppose the question really is, are these differences from baseline position based on the figures that you gave us at the 22nd of February Scrutiny meeting, or have things moved on since then?
I could pick that one up, Richard, if you want. They are based on the same numbers. So in terms of the tonnes that we spoke to you about at the Scrutiny meeting, they're based on the same tonnage diversion. And effectively, the way the calculations work is that we look at the fate of each of the materials individually. So in terms of residual waste, it takes into account, as Richard said, secondary transport, first transport, but also the percentage fate of where each of the different parts of residual waste go. So how much is going to energy from waste, how much is going to landfill, and then effectively there is a carbon cost, or it's actually a greenhouse gas equivalent cost attached to that. But we can provide that breakdown. That's no problem.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Richard. Yeah, I'm just interested about the transport here. I mean, is there any likelihood? Is there anything in the pipeline that is going to reduce that? I.e., are there going to be any sites built more close to where we are? Really, is this or is this sort of very much fixed?
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting question. That so what we've done is we've taken the treatment rates, or ended treatment rates as of recently. Now, what could happen next year is those treatment rates might change, so they might get a bit closer, or some might get a bit further away. Obviously, we're working on the proximity principle here, i.e., we want to reduce our transport, and we want to ensure that we recycle as close as possible to the source of the waste. So the less miles we do is obviously better financially as well as carbon. So all I can say is we can come back to you with an update as to what that figure has changed to next year, once we've got those identified.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, and we have Rochelle now.
Are there any plans for hydrogen or batteries for transport, whether it's electric vehicles or hydrogen-powered vehicles for transport, to reduce the 325 tons? And if so, when or if and how much extra will it cost?
Thanks, Rochelle. Okay, so that will be a work to do with RE3. So RE3 and our partners, we contract out RE3 for our disposal as well as recycling. They use their own contractors to transport waste on our behalf to the treatment or energy from waste as well as landfill. And I will have to get back to you, Rochelle, in terms of what could happen in the future around those green alternatives. But certainly we're looking at, biodiesel, for instance, that kind of thing. But I'll double check on the battery as well as the hydrogen elements.
And the cost, additional cost also, please.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Emma. Is there anybody else? Okay, so it's my turn then. So I'll start off with a couple of small ones. Does the methodology, does the method have a name? I know you say it's approved by RAP, but has it got a particular name?
Do you want me to jump in on that one, Richard?
Yeah, go for it.
So it's actually based on our in-house model, which has got a name called Atropos, which is not that exciting. But it's based out of, the model was actually based off the a greenhouse gas emissions model we built for the GLA, and it's a little bit different to some of the other carbon models because it actually really focuses on waste in a much more detailed way than some of the other carbon models, which is why we used it for this project. There are other ones out there, but it's our kind of in-house bespoke model. So RAP have been through it and audited all the numbers in it. But yeah, it was built specifically for waste management and waste treatment.
Thank you. And then the next question is looking at the transport and the gain. And I know that perhaps this is anecdotally, but I'm sure I heard people talking about one of the advantages of going to alternate weekly collection was that the lorries would have to make fewer trips back to the dump because they'd be able to get full up rather than getting full of one thing and not full of the other. So that quite surprised me. So have I missed something?
So to jump in again, Richard, it's the second leg logistics effectively. So the logistics, the primary logistics, correct? Yes, to some extent you're correct. Largely that is the case. There'll be some examples where effectively the run time of the vehicles might change slightly. So within our model, we also look at effectively the miles travelled per vehicle, because as the round gets bigger, the vehicle is travelling slightly further. That's minor, but as Richard mentioned earlier, it's the secondary logistics of getting the material to the different disposal sites as well, which is taken into account in this model, because we consider effectively point to point as opposed to just that first part, which we look at and we really care about when we're thinking about AWC. So it's combining both.
So because we're collecting more recyclables, we've got to take more stuff to the recycling location. Okay.
Yeah.
So
both parts.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last comment, Emma. Sorry.
It's that effectively when we think about the carbon model, we're thinking about not just the round, we're thinking about the second leg logistics as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, and then my next question is sort of referring back to the Climate Emergency Action Plan, and in the Climate Emergency Action Plan, the heading of waste says that there'll be 48,000 tonnes of carbon saved if the actions all the actions in the plan are listed. I'm trying to reconcile that very large number against the actions which are in the plan against what is actually a very small amount of carbon that's being saved. If you look at the size of our gap, for example, and again, you just compare it to the 48,000, there's a big difference. And I'm just wondering, and I appreciate the move to alternate weekly collections is a very new thing, and the plan was prepared in advance of that. So I'm just trying to reconcile these numbers.
Yes, sorry, Andrew Collins here. I'm just going to jump in quickly for that one. You can add your own bits, Richard and Emma, if you want. But for me on that, obviously, this is only one of the many actions in the waste section. So that's obviously why there is a lot more as well. But we will be incorporating this figure, as obviously as we get more information, we include it to get as accurate as possible. So we'll be incorporating this, working alongside Emma and Richard to update the methodology to be as accurate as possible. Hopefully won't be too many differences from it.
Okay, so perhaps to draw your attention to one of the numbers, for example, is I think 36,000 tonnes based on food recycling or organic material recycling. And again, the 2,500 that we're saving by moving to AWC will include a component of food. And again, it just seems, I appreciate there are smaller pieces of work within the 48, but 36,000 for food compared to what we're saving for this, it just doesn't seem to add up to me.
It's a lot, obviously it's based on the methodology, which is a separate sheet. So it's based on the figures and assumptions and estimations that are used there. So obviously everything has its own differences, depends on like the baseline and stuff. So it's obviously based on that one, and that's a separate question really. So would have to be addressed separately, but hopefully you'll be able to find some more information in the methodology for now.
So it doesn't sound to me like they add up because they've got different methodology. I'd have thought that whatever the method used to calculate them, you would end up roughly in the same sort of area. And we've got.
Well, it's a totally different action. The 36,000 thing is a totally different action to this.
Yeah, it is, but it's based on food recycling, isn't it?
So the tonnage based on that action is totally different to this action.
But this action includes some of that extra food recycling, doesn't it?
I think it clearly needs a separate conversation, because that's not. There's obviously very different things around the action plan. So it obviously the total figure has everything. We could just put it all into one, and then it'd be very confusing. So it's obviously a separate thing on its own. I can't clarify any more than that.
I think. Yeah, go ahead, Sabrina. Step in. Sabrina, Climate Emergency Service Manager. So if I can just clarify, so we are working on the next CEAP progress report, and we are in conversation with Richard's team to incorporate the results from this into the next CEAP progress report. So we are aware of this difference, and we are in conversation around this. So we're not able to provide an answer now. But we will come back to this committee when the next year progress report is drafted and explain clearly how we have incorporated this carbon accounting figure into the CEAP. We are aware of the difference. We are in conversation on this. Brianne, did you want to add anything from your side?
No, I was just going to say that I agree totally. I think that the CEAP is a working document, and we get information provided to us from the services. And I think following this meeting, we just go away and see how we can standardise it, or at the very least, give a better explanation or a clearer explanation about what appear to be differentials. So we will come back to you if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so I've got Norman, and is anybody else who would like to ask a question? So back to Norman.
Thank you. It was really around the transport again. I mean, you're assuming an increase in the amount of transport, which also suggests an increase in the amount of time probably for collection. But in the savings that you presented to us in February, you had 290k of contract efficiencies, and you had 50k of savings from rerouting. How do those square up? They don't, on the face of it, they don't seem to quite square up.
Okay.
Very quickly, just come in before the officers do. So, and I think I just want to make this really clear. There's the difference between collection and disposal. So I just wanted to put it in really simple English. There's the collection part and there's the disposal. And the extra transportation is the disposal side of things. Hope that's clear. I mean, I'll let officers come in and expand on that, but I just wanted to put it as clear as possible.
Thank you. So that was the point that I think was made to me when I asked the question, that the transport is two parts. It's the collecting from the doors, and then there's taking it from local recycling to wherever it goes to be recycled properly. And because there's more recycling, there'll be more trips to the big recycling dump, if you like.
I think they also said more trips back to the collection point.
I think if you've got more recycling, you will have to have more trips.
But when the lorry fills up, when it's collecting from the door, back to the collection centre. That's one part of it. And I thought that's what they said. There was an increase in those trips, not just from the recycling centre.
I'll let the officers take that.
If you could clarify which part of the transport are you talking about? Collection, and therefore back to the collection point to the recycling centre, or from the recycling centre off to wherever its ultimate destination is.
Right, you able to
or
highlight
both?
that?
Yeah, so primarily it is the disposal element we were talking about. So that's completely correct. There is a subtle difference in the collection elements if you think of it in two parts, but it's not causing more tips. Effectively, what will happen is that the distance travelled by each lorry will change, because effectively what we call pass rates, the number of properties each vehicle will pass, will change. So there's a slight difference, the number of miles travelled, not significant. The vast majority of it is in the disposal. But it's not due to additional tips. That's it. It's not a tipping rate ratio. It's just the size of the round is changing. So there is a slight difference there. But the majority of it, the vast majority of it, is in disposal. So it won't cause additional tips. If we think back to the AWC conversation, we aren't saying there's going to be additional tips. Very much the opposite of that. We've balanced it, and Veolia are confident they've balanced it, so this won't trigger additional tips, the move to AWC. But some of the rounds, because of the way they're reconfiguring, some of the vehicles may travel slightly further, which we have taken into account in the transport, but the majority of it is that secondary second leg logistics effectively, which we discussed earlier.
How does commercial waste fit into this idea as well? From school, also including things from schools, from home, from retirement homes, from things like that. Since this is also going there.
Rochelle, I think this is about domestic. This is just about domestic collection. I think we need to stay on the.
I was just wondering how this compared to commercial waste, and that's all.
If officers are happy to take that one.
Okay. We don't actually operate collections from schools, etc., or commercial waste on our existing domestic rounds. We have a separate collection service, which I think has been undertaken centrally through procurement, who govern that, and they may or may not have carbon savings associated with those collections and disposal of that material.
And that's great. The questions keep coming. So now it's good people are engaged. Now, Al, please. Thank you.
Well, could I just check that? I mean, the overall tonnage of waste is staying the same, isn't it? It's just depending what bucket people put it in. Now, we're not saying that there's going to be less waste. It's just it's either going to go in food recycling rather than in the blue bags or the whatever, isn't it? There's no assumption that there's a reduction in the amount of waste, is there?
Overall, you're absolutely right. It's moving recycling from, say, blue bag waste to green bag, as well as kitchen caddy. However, when you introduce alternative collections, there is a waste minimisation element of it as well. So there is more likely to be a reduction in terms of the tonnage that we actually collect. And that's entirely natural, because people say how much food waste they're throwing away and then compensate by not wasting so much or not buying so much in the first place. And also that also relates back to the dry recycling in terms of how much materials are being bought. Hopefully that explains it.
Okay, thanks.
Right now, any more? No. Okay, I'll ask Sarah later on. It doesn't need to be joining the meeting. I've got a little question for Sarah later on. It doesn't need to go. It's not strictly on topic, and I'm trying to keep people on topic. Okay, so and last chance then, guys.
So just to clarify, this will go on to the executive as part of the report going to them?
I sorry, the executive on the 21st of March, Neil? Yeah. So in terms of the slide or the information?
Yeah, it's just clarifying that this information is going as part of that report to the executive.
Yes, yes, it's in Appendix 12 of the report.
Okay, just to say thank you very much for being here this evening, and those officers who can go are welcome to go, and those who can't, sorry.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
The two who did the
Thank
most
you.
talking. Thank you all, but especially the two who did all the talking.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next agenda item is number 17, which is on a Barkham solar farm update.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have a number of officers with us tonight for this item. Firstly, I just want to clarify the pronunciation of our contractor. It's pronounced Weeg. Weeg, yeah. So I just want to deal with that elephant in the room first, because when I first saw the name, I hadn't got a clue how to pronounce it. Yeah, it's pronounced Weeg, who are under a pre-construction services agreement with us. Yeah, in the process of looking at the design. It's all in the report. Just a little thing to say on top as well. Freely Fruity have now got their agreement in place, and they now have access to the site as well, which is an added benefit to this site as well. But yes, so we've obviously completed the procurement process that was approved at executive last year. We've got Bouygues in place, and they're obviously dealing with SSEN as well about the grid connection. But everything's in the report. Unless officers want to add anything, then we can go straight to questions.
Yep, I'd much prefer to go straight to questions. If it's in the report, don't repeat it. Members are grown-ups and they should be reading their reports. Okay, so Michael and then Norman.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm rather pleased to see Freely Fruity on there, because I introduced them to the council. I got chatting with them before I knew anything about them, and they're a very, very good bunch of people. But I just really wondered, what are there going to be any other such schemes like Freely Fruity coming on board? Because I think there'd be quite a scope for that, and just wondering what support will be given to them as well, with like water, electricity, maybe if they need that. If that's going to be made easier to encourage others as well, you know, to maybe take it up.
Would you like me to answer that one, Chair?
Whoever feels comfortable. Sarah's itching to go, so
go for it, Sarah Kay first, and I'll add to it if necessary.
This is going to be the confusing thing. We've got two Sarahs as well. Oh dear. No, I mean, firstly, just to iterate, it's been really good working with Freely Fruity on this, and you know, working in partnership with them, it helps us and it helps them, obviously. And I mean, as to some of the technical requirements around electricity and water, Sarah Morgan will be able to answer that in more detail. We are all about partnership working. You know, the council isn't planning on working in a silo on this agenda and any agenda. So any opportunity to work in collaboration, in partnership, is obviously always going to be welcome. So, and this hopefully will be an example of where we've made it happen. So we look forward to any others.
I'll see what I can do. I can't guarantee that though, but they're very enthusiastic about what they do. So I think I know one or two other councillors have sort of know about them as well.
Sarah Morgan, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Just in terms of the question about utilities, etc. Yes, they do have a requirement for water in particular, and we've been able to facilitate that utilising the existing services that we have on the site that come through High Barn Farm. So we've been able to do that. I think we've pretty much been able to meet all of their needs in terms of being able to facilitate them onto the site. And just to reiterate what Sarah says, really, if there are other organisations who can contribute to this project and to its delivery, particularly around the landscaping and the planting. It's an extensive scheme. It has an extensive landscaping element to it, and absolutely up for working with partners where we can and where there's benefit to both. But certainly the partnership with Freely Fruity has been great, and I believe they are due to start planting this weekend. So we are imminently to see things in the ground, which is great.
Thank you, Sarah. Anything else, Michael?
That's fine, thank you. It'd be nice to be kept updated on something like that.
I'm sure the council's press releases will be awash for that, right? Norman, would you like to go now?
Thanks. I'm really interested in the returns. I mean, you've pointed out the forecast returns now are extremely favourable against the original forecasts. I just invite you to say a bit more about that, how the extra income comes about, and although the projected costs of the project seem to have gone up quite a bit, then also the expected income's going up. Perhaps I'll just give you the opportunity really to tell us a bit more about that, please.
Yeah, I think Ian would be best placed to go into this. He's itching to go.
Thank you, Ian. I can see him as well, Sarah. I've got him. He's behind you.
Yeah, I think in short, snapshot answer to that is that the underlying energy price has just gone bonkers. It's gone through the roof, and that's allowing us to effectively retail at a better rate. So, you know, even if that's retailing to ourselves or if that's retailing to private sector, and whatever that entails, those rates have gone up considerably. You know, wholesale energy prices, electricity has gone up by, you know, circa 250% in the last 2 years. So just on that footing alone, that's what's allowed for the difference in pricing.
Thank you. Anything else?
So, I mean, what assumptions are we making about that? Because it's going to take some time, obviously, for this project to come on stream. Are we getting guaranteed prices, or what sort of risk are we taking?
I don't think we're taking a massive risk, if I'm honest with you. As dreadful as this sounds, I mean, I've been in energy all my life, and energy generally only travels in one direction, and that's up. Admittedly, the price has gone significant, but I honestly can't. I can see it dropping back slightly. And built within the models that we've done, we've been reasonably conservative, reasonably safe with the figures that we put in there. So I honestly think, if anything, you know, it should be better than what we've suggested. But I won't say that on record, of course, because, you know, we want to be safe.
So, were we planning to sell electricity as it's generated, or are we sort of forward contracting in some sort of way? And if so, what sort of timescale?
So a full decision on the basis of what we do with the resultant energy hasn't been taken yet, but we've got options available to us. The options are we either retail to ourselves, in other words, we retail to Woking Borough Council to provide our own estate, which, if I'm honest with you, is probably favourable to the council in terms of carbon reduction. So that's probably the best option, but there are other options further and wider than that.
So what's sort of percentage of the power that we generate would we consume ourselves? What's the equation? Just roughly even? And I'm not expecting an accurate answer, but you know, do we generate more power than we use as the council overall, or how does the equation work out?
Okay, it's difficult because obviously we use both electricity and gas, but obviously we have a kilowatt hour value for both measures. So I'm getting a bit technical here, but in essence, from both gas and electricity usage, if we equate that against purely electrical energy generation from the solar farm, it's significant. And like I say, our estate does chop and change a little bit, so I want to be safe with the detail that I'm giving you there. But you know, circa 60% of our energy could come effectively from the solar farm.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. I've got Rochelle now.
Are we encouraging smaller scale solar farms on top of all the car parks. We have a lot of car parks.
So Rochelle, I'm going to cut you off because this is agenda items about the Barkham. Okay, there's a thing later on which is a bit more general, and you can go there. But do you want a few minutes? If anyone else has got a question, then you can have a chance to think of something actually on the agenda thing. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, Al. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wondered whether there are any constraints on the solar farm, you know, because you have interconnectors and all that sort of thing. I mean, is it maximum? Are we getting the maximum out of it that we can?
It's the biggest size solar farm we can have for the capacity that the grid can give us at that point. If we wanted to go any bigger, then the infrastructure underneath by SSEN would have to be upgraded.
Okay, thanks.
And anybody else got any questions? Okay, I have a couple. The papers talk about equalising the revenue, and I don't think you guys are finance, but you might be able to tell me at what point does that start? At what point do the financial statements of the council start seeing this £1 million per year benefit? Because we've given permission. They're going to break ground, I think, later this year. They're going to connect, perhaps finish next year, but they won't be able to connect for 2 more years, possibly. So at what point in that time does we start seeing that paper benefit in our financial statements as opposed to our cash benefit, which I appreciate will be later?
Do you want me to come in on that one, Ian? As you rightly pointed out, Andy, neither Ian or I are our finance or accounting team, so I will do my best to answer. I was just looking at the information that went to overview and scrutiny as part of the part 2 back in October, and that looked at that sort of positive revenue coming through from year 3 from where we are now. But I would ask if I could just take that back and clarify that question, because that's my reading of the financial figures that I've got, but I would like to clarify that if I can.
Thank you. And do you know, is that associated with a particular milestone of the project? Is it when it's ready to be connected, or is it after it has been connected?
That from looking at what I can see now, it looks like it's from when it's ready to be connected. But obviously that connection timescale, there is that question mark still over the exact connection time with grid, which we're working on to bring forward as soon as we can. But can I take that one back and come back and clarify that one with you? I think Ian's itching to maybe clarify.
I think I can see. Thank you, and I can see Sarah. I can't tell from Ian's expression if he wants to jump in or not. Sarah's. I can see.
No, I was just going to say, my understanding is that it gets equalised from when we actually connect to the grid, and my understanding is that the date of the year 3 is the hope that we can connect to that point, and we're working with SSEN to bring back the drop dead date is further in the future, but we are working with them to bring it forward. So the date we've got in the plan is the absolute latest date they can connect by, but there's the opportunity to bring it forward, and we're working on the assumption that the relationship that we've got with them and that we've got with them, that will allow that to happen. That's obviously one of the risks around the project, but that's where the revenue starts to come in once we've actually connected and are actually generating electricity. That is my understanding from working through this. But obviously, so we'll get that full clarification from finance.
Thank you. And then sort of in the same sort of area, there's, again, according to the document pack, there's possibly a 2-year period where we have a completed solar farm, and thanks to the vagaries of SSN, is it Scottish Southern?
SSEN.
SSEN. We'll have our farm sitting there for 2 years, just soaking up the sun's rays and not pushing electricity anywhere. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and it's is the council doing? I appreciate we're dealing with a company, and we haven't got any levers. Are we doing anything with our members of parliament? Because this doesn't affect us, just us. This must be a countrywide issue. Have we approached our MPs? We've got 4 of them for the time being. We might as well use them to get them to kick some bottoms at the highest level, because this must be holding back projects all over the country.
I mean, I'll just come in from politician point of view, I'm not aware that we've done anything directly with the MPs. One of the things, because it's wider than this though, there's other things that we could be working on. For example, I mentioned about the infrastructure only allowing so much capacity, and obviously that's going to need upgrading. So there's myself and Sabrina, we sit on the Berkshire Net Zero Task Force. And there's, we've talked about an opportunity there, whereas Berkshire-wide, we actually look at the renewable energy generation opportunities across the borough that we could actually then work with SSEN and say, look, these are the projects coming up. Basically, this is where you need to be investing in your infrastructure and working out these sort of more collaborative approach. It's very initial idea at this stage, but this is kind of how we need to be working. This is what other parts of the country have started to do. I know they've done something in Cambridgeshire where they've worked on this to have that sort of more forward plan. But I think writing to our MPs is a good idea as well on that very specific issue because ultimately, if we are going to meet the targets that have been set in law for our carbon reduction as a country to be net zero, we need to be accelerating this. So we need all the pieces of the puzzle to match up.
Thank you, sir. Did I see Ian wanting to come in there?
No,
if I didn't, that's fine.
Myself. I think it's very good.
No, that's fine. So again, following up on that, but it does seem to me that it's such a big problem that relying on the LEP to do it just doesn't see. I mean, it does seem to me that it needs a big political stick, and unless we engage our local sticks, we need to be driving for that change from the top, the legislative approach, don't we?
No, I agree. I'm just making it an example of an avenue is the point I'm making. There are multiple things that we need to be doing on lobbying on this, but it's not just us, as you say. And I know that a lot of lobbying is done by the LGA, the Local Government Association, on behalf of local authorities across the country. And again, it's not just going to affect local authorities. It's anyone wanting to build a solar farm. But obviously, local authorities are in a position that they can do this. And if we want to encourage more to do that, then we need to remove those barriers. But then there's also community-led energy generation projects, which is where the local electricity bill comes in. There's quite a few barriers. And it's a multitude of methods of lobbying that need to happen.
So are we going to lobby them or not?
Can I just come in on that? Because in terms of when we're referring to the LEP, we're actually talking about lobbying as Berkshire. So our voice is so much louder than if we're just to lobby as Wokingham and then separately as Bracknell. So it rather than the LEP bringing it together, it's really the local authorities that are coming together because, as Sarah quite rightly said, we're not the only ones with these issues. That connection issue goes right across all of the authorities. So it is something that it's early days, but we're looking at a collaborative lobbying, as you say, high up in government, because otherwise we're just not going to be able to get the traction we need to deliver these savings.
Thank you, Ran. I can't help thinking that LEP doesn't have any votes, and the MPs listen to people with votes. And I really do think if we can get our members of parliament, I mean, that's what they're there for, isn't it? To take up our struggles on our behalf in Parliament, and they will benefit everybody else as well. But I really do think we need to look at that.
Point taken. Thank you.
You, Sarah. Right. Is there any other questions on this? No, good. I don't have any questions. So again, thank you very much. I've got an awful feeling it'll be the same officers as hanging around for the next bit. So let's move on to the next item then, which is solar farms delivery within the Climate Emergency Action Plan. So this is a look at the evolution of the role of solar farms, or the importance of solar farms within the CEAP.
Yeah, and I know we're calling this solar farms, but actually it's more general renewable energy. We don't necessarily want to put all our eggs in one basket. There are other methods of generating renewable energy. I know it's been solar farms in the CEAP, but we are looking at all possibilities. And I think the question was, obviously the original CEAP started with quite a few solar farms, and now it doesn't have as many. Ultimately, the CEAP it takes us to 2030, and we wanted to make sure that it's smart. So obviously actually achievable. And so it's a much more realistic figure, but this doesn't mean that if opportunities come along that they don't happen. It gives us an idea of where we're going in a smart fashion. But yeah, everything's in the report, unless any of the officers want to say anything before questions. No, they're shaking their heads. I think ready for questions.
That's great. What a great introduction. So as Sarah kindly pointed out, there's lots of information in the report. Does anybody have any questions on the report? I've got Norman. Okay, Norman.
I mean, it's an obvious question. We want, you're proposing reducing the number of solar farms from 5 to 2, which results in less savings in terms of carbon dioxide. It also, we were told in the previous paper, how much better the return is going to be. So I understand, that we'd have to borrow quite a considerable amount of money to do 5 solar farms, but shouldn't we be pressing ahead if that is the case, just on the financial basis and on the environmental impact? It doesn't necessarily seem to square up with our net zero sort of aims.
Before officers come in, just to talk high level, I mean, firstly, how it affects our carbon emissions actually depends on what we do with the electricity, if we use it on our own assets or not. So, and at the very original SEAP with the 5, that hadn't been decided. And as you know, with Barkham Solar Farm, we will make that decision, and we're keeping our options open at this stage. We've also got to be realistic, and it's, that very original SEAP reduced at the next 5 to 4. So that was already reduced as we started to understand more. We're trying to be realistic about what's achievable, because we've also got to think about the grid connection issues as well. So what we've put is what's achievable, but that doesn't stop us from putting in any more if we feel that there are more achievable within the timeframe that the SEAP sets. Don't forget, the SEAP only goes to 2030, and that doesn't stop us doing anything beyond that. We also have feasibility studies being done at the moment for a couple of sites that we're looking at. And if it turns, the point is there are options out there, but it's just providing a realistic picture at this moment in time.
Thank you. Do any of the officers want to add to that?
If I'm able to come in just on that one, Andy, I just to follow up, I guess, what Sarah says about the realism of delivery. When this report is referring to solar farms, we're all envisaging the sort of the large scale things that we're seeing, like we're delivering at Barkham. We need significant land holdings and available land to deliver property projects of that scale. And we know through the work that we're doing that actually 5 solar farms of that scale on land that we own by 2030 from the work that we've done is not a deliverable or realistic target. As Sarah referenced, we're looking at a potential 2 other sites of similar scale to Barkham, and that work is ongoing. But I think it goes on to a point that maybe Rochelle made earlier, is about there are other options, there are other things maybe of smaller scale, looking at other sites, other ways of generating renewable energy. So I don't think the 5 to 2 of solar farms of this scale undermines our ambition or what we want to achieve. It's just looking at how it is realistic to achieve those targets. And I think for solar farms of this scale, another 2 by 2030 is realistic. 5 by 2030 is not something we would be able to deliver, but we have other opportunities in other ways to deliver on those renewable energy targets.
So what is it about the schemes that's not deliverable in that timescale?
The ones that aren't deliverable is we do not own, we do not have land that can deliver, that is available and deliverable, that could deliver 5 solar farms by 2030 of the scale that we see at Barkham. That is the reality of the council's property portfolio. So we are looking at delivering where we can, which is potentially the 2 that we're looking at. And then, as I said, it's about looking at other opportunities of a smaller scale or a different nature. And that's why Sarah introduced us as looking at renewable energy projects in totality, not just solar, because we cannot deliver 5 solar farms by 2030 of the scale that we have at Barkham.
Again, you say cannot. It's, let's assume you can buy the land then, you know, I'm just trying to challenge the assumption that it can't be delivered. I'm not saying that it can or it can't, but you know, what is actually preventing us from delivering? Assuming that we can buy land, you know, there's contractors available, etc. You know, what prevents us from doing it?
Well, the assumption that we could buy land is a very big assumption to make, and is not a decision that has been taken by this authority yet to purchase land for that process. I would question whether there is land available at the scale we would require at a cost we could afford. So based on the current property assets of the council, we cannot provide for solar farms for 5 of the scale that we've got. If the authority wants to go down a different track and look at buying land in, that's a decision that they could make. But based on what we have now, it is not. We don't have the scale to do that. I think.
Could I also? Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was going to add, we also have to consider resource as well.
One at a time.
Sorry.
Sarah Morgan, have you finished?
No, sorry. Yes, I had done. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, Sarah. Okay.
So I was going to say there's also. Oh, losing power sockets there. I was also going to add, we also have to consider the resource of our officers as well, because we've obviously got the delivery of this one. We're looking at feasibility studies of other, and we're also, you know, our officers are looking at a multitude of projects and other schemes as well to help our residents as well with their carbon emission reduction journeys as well. So we have to think about resource of officers as well through all this, just to add on to what Sarah Morgan was saying.
Thanks, Sarah. Al?
Yeah, just I mean, one land resource we've got is in Woking is the A329M, you know, and I mean, with a climate emergency, you know, perhaps we'll find it's over-engineered, and there's actually quite a lot of spare space in it, and it could be sort of downgraded to a single carriageway, you know.
I think, Al, we're going on to the solar panels on every bus stop. That's not really the topic of this paper. It's fascinating as it is. Any other questions? It's unfair to ask officers about general stuff when you ask them to prepare a paper on something. It's a fine club you're both in, right? Any other questions? Okay, I'll have a go then. So what you know, to some extent, I'm sort of going to repeat the questions which Norman has asked, and what struck me was the difference in language between the description of the current solar farm, where the finances are fantastic and it's a great investment and everything is going to be great, and then the language that was used about possible future solar farms. And on one we had a very positive outlook, and on one it was very, very gloomy, and it just struck me that it was actually confusing the issue slightly. I understand the constraint on land and I understand the constraint on officers, but I just wondered why we were bringing in that financial perspective, which just didn't tally with the previous report's financial perspective.
Is that particularly around income generation, Andy, or cost, or just in general you found it was a different message?
It was the whole financial constraints. In the second report, we were presented with financial restraints on the farms, and I just could, given what we'd read in the first report, that didn't seem to make. I do understand the land constraint and the, you know, developing capacity. I understand all of that. I see those as legitimate things, but I just couldn't understand why we were using 2 different types of financial outlooks for the 2 different reports.
Okay, I don't think that was. I'll go first, Sabrina, and then you feel free to. I don't think that was intentional. What we are anticipating doing through the feasibility work that we're doing on the 2 solar farms, additional new sites that we're looking at, is that we will assess their financial performance in the same structure and same way, and with the same constraints that we've done the Barkham solar farm that was presented in detail to Overview and Scrutiny back in autumn, and to the executive before that. And that will therefore be a direct comparison from one to the other. We are even within the 6 months, 8 months since we've been at Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we are in a difficult position with our finances in relation to costs and inflation. We are only seeing construction costs going one way, and going quickly. So we must be prudent. We must be aware of that risk. We have real-time information about the cost estimate for Barkham, and working with Bouygues, we will get that cost finalised in the next couple of months. So I think it is right that there is some serious consideration about the financial commitment and the exposure that this type scale of project brings the council. You're right, we are positive about what we're getting at Barkham, but that is a fully worked through business case based on real-time costs that we've got now. We don't know where construction costs, for example, will be in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, when we're looking at these later farms. I think it's more an air of caution that we should have put forward, just in terms of that position around inflation, than doom and gloom, which maybe it might have come across as.
Thank you. So then my next question is, I just want to understand a little bit more about the land constraint, because I understand, for me, that there's a big difference between there not being the land available for 5 farms and there not being the land available by 2030 for 5 farms. For example, we could have, hypothetically, we could have 3 fantastic locations, but the farmers or whoever's sitting on them has got a fantastic tenancy arrangement, and they can't be lodged unless we provide them with, someone's children as a bribe or something like that. So is it a question of the tenancy or the current occupiers or the current land uses of possible future sites, which means land isn't available at the moment or in the next 5 or 6 years? Or is it we literally do not have that many big holdings?
It's an element of both. I think if I take the latter one in terms of our holdings, we do have substantial holdings across the borough, but we also have significant demands on those holdings from all sorts of service provision, from schools to care homes to solar farms to sang to all sorts of things. And part of my main role is how we balance the demand on those assets, and we spend a lot of time saying, well, with this asset, well, it could be this, it could be that, could be something else, and through with members having to decide how best to utilize those. So yes, it is an element of we don't have enough land in the right place and available to do everything that we want to do, and so we have to balance those needs of different services. We could put solar farms, if the infrastructure was there, we could put it on all our land holdings, but then we wouldn't have land to do the other things that our other services need around schools and education and all that type of stuff. So there needs to be that balance, and my job is to understand what's the best way to use the assets and advise councillors in that way. In terms of farm tenancies, etc., and most the sites that we are looking at are sites that currently have tenancies on them. Our tenants have different terms and conditions, they have different notice periods, etc., and the assets generate different level of income for WBC, and then there are also considerations around best agricultural land. All of those things come into play. The 2 sites that we're looking at, we think, or our view from the initial feasibility, is that utilising these sites for solar is the best use of that land when taking into consideration all of the other demands on it, and how deliverable they are, impact on the tenant, farmer, etc. So it's a bit of both, and I'd say it's quite a jigsaw puzzle to try and work out where the best place to locate these things are in their deliverability. And as we come forward with the new sites, we will obviously be able, proposed new sites will be able to ensure that members have full sight of why we think that's the most appropriate, and the deliverability of that site as well.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
that was.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? No, okay, so I'll have another go. So, last one for me. I promise. So it was just, again, when reading the report, I was struck by the sort of obviously the movement from 5 farms in the original plan down to 2 or 3 now. And I think the word used was aspirational, and the original 5 farms was aspirational. I think that the financial estimates were certainly aspirational, where it's gone from an estimate for 20. I appreciate people here might not have been involved in the original plan, but it just seems that that's almost beyond aspirational, isn't it? If you go from 5 farms for 20 million to 1 farm for 24 or 25, and then you've got to sack off 2 or 3 of them. But it just seemed aspirational was almost like a I don't want to say cop out, but it felt like another word could have been put in there. It was way too optimistic.
Is that a question or a statement?
Was it way too optimistic?
It's hard for me to answer, given that yes, it was beyond my time. Sarah wanted to say something now. I'll let her answer that.
I'm happy to sort of come in on that, actually, because I think, you know, when we first wrote the CAP, we had to work really quickly to get it up and out, and we worked with the best intentions of officers at the time, and they gave us the information that they had, and that's what we used, and that's why we've always called this a working document. So it's not fact, and it's not sort of held in time. It's something that evolves as we get more information. So, you know, that was best endeavours as it stood. That was our aspiration, to have 5 solar farms. You know, from talking to the experts that we had at the time that we went to speak to, those were the costs our understood officers that gave to us. But I think, I don't think it was any kind of, you know, it wasn't because we were being over optimistic or anything else. It is something that we're resetting as we go through, Andy, and, you know, it will be something that we update, as with all of the targets that we've got, as we get more information coming through.
Thank you, Rhian. Anybody else? Before we close this one? No more questions. So again, thank you very much, officers, for staying up this evening and coming to join us. So I've managed to lose my agenda. There it is. Yeah. Now the next item is item 19, which is climate emergency deliberative process. So again, members have had the report. They've had the document. I don't know if Sabrina or Sarah wants to say a few words just to introduce it very quickly, given that we have all read it.
I don't think there's really too much to say. It's a very detailed report with the backing information, so I don't think there's anything I want to say unless Sabrina or Rhian do.
It might be helpful sort of going through what the next steps are, because we are asking the committee to comment on the next steps, and maybe just expanding on those might preempt some of the questions, if that's okay.
Yes, go on then.
Okay. So the report goes through the community deliberative process that was run in 2022, following a council motion in 2021. The paper does explain what the results from the peer group sessions and the resident survey were, and we attached those results as an appendix. So I won't go into the details of this, but the information that we gathered from the peer group sessions and the resident surveys is being reviewed by my team, particularly by our newly appointed engagement officer who joined our team 3 weeks ago, and we are cross-referencing the deliberative process results with what is already included in the CAP and discussing next steps. So in terms of next steps, at present what we are proposing to do is that we're looking to create a vision statement. So a statement with a vision for a net zero borough that will be included in the next iteration of the CAP. We're also planning to work with designers to make the CAP more user-friendly and visually engaging. We are aware that the CEAP is a technical document and is extensive. So in order to engage our community around it, which was ultimately the aim of this deliberative process, there is a need for it to be more accessible and engaging from a design point of view. So we propose to add infographics as well as a visual roadmap to a net zero borrow process to life. And we aim to complete this work as soon as possible and reflect these changes in the next iteration of the CEAP, which will be presented to Council in September 2023. And once this has been approved and well, hopefully approved, we will use the results from this design work to engage our community and relevant stakeholders through existing forums and partnerships, and that engagement work is very much in discussion at the moment. So I just wanted to clarify these points, if it helps preempting any questions, but happy to take more questions.
Thank you, Sabrina. Does anybody have any questions on the engagement process? Sorry, Norman, yep.
It's just an observation. There's lots of interesting information here. I read it with great interest. It's interesting to see what people are feeding back. But again, do we think we've got a completely representative sample? I mean, it does seem to be white British male, 55 to 70 is the predominance. So, you know, do we feel we're getting a across the board sort of view, or is it impossible to get other age groups to engage sort of in these types of processes? It's really just I suppose, an observation and perhaps a question.
Thank you. I'm happy to address it. Yes, through the survey, we engaged a significant proportion of the survey respondents were in that category that you've mentioned. So middle-aged white men. But through the deliberative process, we also engaged through the peer group sessions. We engaged a number of stakeholders. We engaged businesses, town and parish councils representatives, and representatives from various community groups. So we do believe that the answers that we got are representative of the wider population, and we are working with the various departments to include them in the CEAP, and as well on a communication and engagement plan to ensure that we capture the view of other members of the community, not just on the CEAP on this project, but on all the projects that we work on. So it's a fair point, and we are aware that we struggle to engage certain members of our community, and we are working on that.
I'd also say that whilst this is the first part of the deliberative process, we do believe that consultation should be ongoing and continuous. So we've got a number of other consultations sort of planned coming forward, because obviously views change with time, and it's just one stake in time, if you like, and then we'll be and also now that we've got an engagement officer, I don't know if Sabrina, if you want to talk about what they will be doing. They will be looking and reaching out to the community, young people, older people, people within some of our that have less access, I suppose, to decision making and feeding back. So we will be working on it on a continual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, it's my turn again. So again, sort of following on from where Norman left off, I mean, I was struck by I think the comment that the initial groups were self-selected, so that you had people who wanted to be there, and I suspect, and I know from friends of mine who are on the groups, came into those groups with pretty prefixed opinions. And then the survey, using the Engage platform, is actually a very small response. So you had almost like some very, very committed people. Well, apparently one of the people was a climate change denier, but you know, you've got to take all views into account. And then what their output was then voted on, or by a very, very small sample of people in the borough. And I'm just wondering how useful the whole process is really, because there didn't seem to be much coming out of there that you wouldn't have come up with anyway. And there's certainly no sense you could build a consensus around it, to me.
Yeah, I take your point, Andy. Yeah, exactly. You know, there's nothing there that stands out, I would say, particularly as particularly radical or something that you can think, well, that's a really interesting idea. Perhaps we could progress that. And I think we have recognised that, and that's why our view is that we need to go out more and more regularly to engage and make more effort to sort of dive further into, you know, into communities and with people that perhaps ordinarily wouldn't respond, as you say, and get their views. So it is a continuous process, but we do have to come up with a vision that we would like to start off with, certainly, that we put into the CAP coming forward. Again, it's not and never anything that's set in stone, but it's the start of a process, I think, where we will continue to engage, to get people to shape the vision, but also to engage to try and get people to change their behaviours. So it's a sort of dual pronged approach. And it's only recently, I would say, that we've got the number of officers on board that we need to actually be able to give that a really concerted push, if you like, David.
Thank you. And then the other thing which struck me was, and this is again a concern I have had for a while, was that the discover stage of it was very one way. The volunteers were given presentations or given material to look at, but there didn't seem to be a sense of learning from that, because you look at the ideas that are coming out at the end of it, and you're thinking, you know, you might as well put it up on Facebook and said, what should we do? There wasn't a sense of developed thinking coming out of it.
I know that we did go and ask a lot of experts right across the borough. We had Graham Cooper who came in, we made videos with them. So we did, I think, have some quite inspirational external experts, if you like, coming to help people with their conclusions and their suggestions. So I'm not sure I totally agree with that, Andy, but I take your point, and we will look at what we can do in future to perhaps have more inspirational idea generation.
No, I'm not talking about inspirational speakers. What I'm talking about is the people in the groups reaching a level of understanding of the issues around the suggestions that people are making in good faith, and which I'm sure any of the officers or you can look through and say, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that, and these are the reasons why we can't do that, but yet these suggestions are still coming out of the process, whereas you'd have thought a better process would have been for the guys in the groups to have had a better understanding of what the limitations are, because there are limitations, and I didn't get the sense, looking at the output, that the people in the groups had any sense of those limitations.
No, and I don't think that we gave them those either. I mean, the consultant that we had that came in, I think, was allowing a level of I suppose, free idea generation, which came through. And I think, you know, their advice to us wasn't that we were to block it by saying, look, we can't put, I don't know, cycle routes right across the borough, because that's just going to be too expensive. So it was, rather than sort of stop those in their tracks, it was just get all the ideas to see just how far people would like to go. I mean, you know, some of it is, everybody will say that they would really like to be net zero carbon by 2030, but actually we also had a feeling that they're not really prepared to take the consequences of that. So people may say that, but then when they come to realise that they're probably going to have to walk everywhere, use far more sustainable transport than they were before, we were trying to get I think part of what we were trying to do was actually get a measure of just what they understood by being net zero carbon, and how palatable it was for them, rather than saying that this isn't possible for you to do, or we won't be able to execute this. So it was a little bit more about getting people's appetite for change than anything.
Can I just come in and add, and the second phase of this wasn't a voting thing on those ideas. It was questions around understanding if this was to happen, what are the barriers? So it was much more informative rather than a simple veto, yes or no, and what was being suggested. But ultimately, this is about providing that vision. I suspect there are a lot of people out there that think that if we are going to tackle the climate emergency, we're all going to have to live under a rock and have no luxuries at all. And that there will be a number of people that think that. I think we're not going to be able to live our comfortable lifestyles, and the truth is, actually, you know, setting that vision where there's those possibilities, and what does life look like in the borough when it's carbon neutral? How are we going to be moving about? How are our homes going to be heated? And you know, the possibilities that are that. I mean, just to give an example, we've already, as a nation, reduced 10% of our peak demand of electricity just by switching to LED light bulbs. So doing a simple thing that hasn't really impacted people in the way they live has had quite a significant difference on energy usage. So it's helping people with that visioning. And if people can see that future, then you're more likely to bring them with you on the journey. If we just simply say, you need to change this and you need to do that to save carbon emissions, you're not going to bring people with you.
Okay, before I go on, anybody else got any questions? Oh, okay, so, sorry. Well, I read it, so I've got some questions. So, just a very small thing. 2.21 general comments is that there's a section on carrot and stick, and I've got to say I disagree with the discourage people from using private motor cars. I think there's it says making it less introducing more traffic calming measures and speed limits, and that to me that's actually a carrot about safety rather than a stick to car owners. That's a naughty smile there, Rihanna. But
I think you're probably right. I think there's probably a number of facets on all of these. So yeah, you know, actually, if people are, the original reason we brought traffic calming in actually was to reduce accidents. You know, perhaps even reduce noise pollution or whatever else. But actually, there's a duality of benefit that we'll also get. You know, we'll get carbon reductions, but you know, obviously there are a group of people that would see that as a nuisance. So it's really about perspective.
Thank you. Okay, and so my next question is slightly broader, and it's in the MTFP there was some confusion because there was a heading called, I think, climate Citizens Assembly for 120,000. That's what it's. Sorry, shaking it. That's what it said. Okay, and I appreciate it's not a citizens' assembly, but then in this document it says the cost of the engagement was about £40,000, and then we're seeing 120,000 in the MTFP. And is there a link between that 120 grand in the MTFP and the £40,000 in this document? Thank you.
Do you know, Andy, I think I would have to go back and check that. I don't think that we've got something, you know, perhaps it's wrongly labelled, but we certainly haven't spent £120,000 on a citizens' assembly. I'm sure you would have noticed. I think that's to cover posts that we were talking about earlier that are coming in to help us with the engagement with the communities, with the businesses, and to step that up, but also to start trying to work on some of the behaviour change. So I think that's what that's about. There is a budget line of around 40,000 which paid for the deliberative process, which we've yet to spend all of that. And this is the next stage is what we're talking about. We're just about to go into the next stage where we'd like to use that really to make the CAP a bit more accessible and visually enticing, if you like. So that's you know, that's the next step. And you know, obviously we were going to say, if you know, any thoughts from this group would like to be put forward, then we'd definitely consider them.
I can see Sarah is. Yeah.
The only time that I've ever seen citizens' assembly specific in relation to a financial document was in the budget amendment, not in the actual original document. So it's about deliberative process is how it's titled in the MTFP.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and then so the last question I have, I promise, is with you were talking about changes to the CAP and making it more visually appealing. I appreciate that. That would be a really good thing. I hope that does not come at the expense of the sort of extensive tables of numbers and descriptions of projects. I hope it's something which sticks at the front and perhaps replaces some of the text, because I think all members find that bit at the back with the detail very, very useful.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to stop that. We've invested so much in getting that detail, and it's not something that every local authority does by any stretch of the imagination. And I think if we're going to have a direction and understand what we're doing by our actions, then we do need that complex breakdown. But there's also something about making it perhaps a bit more accessible to everyday people who read it, and make it clearer about what we're trying to do, and some of the actions that we've done that perhaps are successes, and as you suggested, perhaps explain some of the difficulties that we actually have in reaching some of the outcomes we've got. So I think that's the approach we're trying to do, really, is use it as a more of an educative piece as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and overall, this strategic visioning piece is really important. What has happened, we went straight into developing an action plan, and actually that piece that sits above definitely needs to happen, not just externally, but internally as well, where we're balancing different competing priorities and having that strategic direction, that vision that this all sits in. It makes decision-making process much more robust as well.
Thank you. Right, anybody else? No, in that case, I'm done, I think. Okay, so again, once again, sorry. Okay. So once again, just to say thank you to Sabrina and Rhiannon for staying on so late. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is item 20, which is the work programme. So we'll look at, I'm on page 11 now, I'm just looking at 11, that's what we were looking at today. No, it's not. Page 11 is what's coming up at the next meeting in May. Are there any comments on that? People generally happy with that? Okay, I'll take the silence as acquiescence. And then 12 is other items identified for scrutiny. And again, we can add to these at any time. I don't think, as long as you've got stuff for me. The composition of the committee might be totally different in after the local elections. So, okay, no comments, complaints, changes. Okay, good. And then the next item is the action tracker. Neil it's only the second meeting of the committee, so there's not much action to track. But thank you very much, Neil, for doing that. Any comments, questions, complaints? No. So I think that is almost a wrap. Just to say thank you very much for being on the committee for both meetings that we've had. Thank you to the officers, and especially Neil for his support. And I don't know if there's still some officers online, I think. Perhaps they've muted us, I don't know. But thank you very much to the officers. Chris.
Yeah, Andy, and the rest of the committee, my apologies for being tardy coming in. I've had a bad day at work. I'm the job getting out of London, and I do apologise for being late.
No worries at all. What happens to the best of us. Okay, any other comments before we close for this? It's not an academic year, is it? This political year. Okay, no, thank you all very much. Good night.